You are finishing a policy summary nobody important will ever read when the notification appears at the bottom of your screen. It isn't marked urgent, it isn't encrypted beyond standard clearance, it looks like another misrouted attachment drifting through bureaucratic gravity toward whoever happens to be awake late enough to receive it. You almost ignore it. Your job exists precisely because nothing dramatic is supposed to happen at your level. You translate intelligence assessments into language safe for committees. You remove panic from reports written by people trained to expect catastrophe. Your responsibility ends where decision-making begins. That separation protects everyone involved. You open the file because the sender field is empty. Inside is a live strategic projection linked to an upcoming summit between two nuclear states scheduled in less than 30 hours. The meeting is publicly framed as routine diplomacy. Markets expect stability afterward. Military alerts have already been lowered in anticipation. But the predictive model attached to the briefing tells another story. One delegation intends to introduce an unexpected territorial demand during negotiations, not to achieve agreement, but to force domestic political dominance at home. Intelligence modeling shows an 82% probability of retaliatory escalation within 72 hours. Economic sanctions follow. Naval positioning follows sanctions. Automated defense doctrines activate once positioning begins. Every simulation after that point ends in conflict. You check authorization chains. The risk classification has been downgraded twice. Someone higher than you decided the danger was politically inconvenient. You reread the timeline. Even if leadership notices the risk later, reaction windows collapse too quickly. Once public statements are made, neither side can retreat without appearing weak. Pride becomes policy, policy becomes momentum. You are not permitted to alter strategic briefs. You calculate consequences anyway. If you do nothing, events unfold exactly as projected. If you intervene, you falsify procedural authority, potentially destroy your career, and expose yourself to investigation for manipulating international intelligence flow. You hesitate for less than a minute. Then you rewrite the executive summary. You change nothing factual. You reorder emphasis. You elevate escalation probability tables to the opening page. You attach secondary economic projections severe enough to trigger automatic senior review protocols. You route the document through an emergency advisory channel designed for imminent threat assessment. The system accepts it because technically everything is accurate. 6 hours later, preparatory teams request clarification. 12 hours later, negotiation language changes quietly. 24 hours later, the territorial demand never appears. The summit concludes peacefully. Leaders congratulate one another publicly. News analysts praise diplomacy that never actually occurred. You delete your draft history. 3 days pass before security escorts arrive at your workstation. You assume termination. Instead, they bring you to an office you have never entered despite years in the building. A senior advisor places your rewritten briefing on the table without speaking. He already knows. He doesn't accuse you, he asks a single question. How did you know which detail would force intervention? You explain incentives. Leaders respond to perceived risk to stability more reliably than moral argument. Economic collapse alarms institutions faster than military danger. You didn't convince anyone. You adjusted what felt urgent. He studies you for a long time. Then he explains something nobody ever says aloud. World leaders rarely choose outcomes. They choose among outcomes prepared for them in advance. Whoever prepares those options holds real influence. A week later, your position disappears from organizational records. Your access expands instead of shrinking. You stop writing reports meant for archives. You begin shaping the briefings leaders actually read. You do not gain authority. You gain proximity to decisions before they exist. At first, the work feels subtle. You restructure advisory packets. You adjust which intelligence arrives first. You ensure diplomatic solutions appear statistically safer than aggressive ones without explicitly recommending restraint. Leaders believe conclusions are their own.
They thank their instincts. You learn quickly that power rarely announces itself. It hides inside sequence and framing. The first option presented anchors discussion. Numerical probability overrides emotional reaction. Urgency determines action more than ideology ever does. You begin controlling urgency. A border incident threatens retaliation between allied nations. Military advisors request escalation scenarios. You ensure economic coordination proposals appear fully modeled, while strike options require further verification. Delay replaces reaction. Tensions dissolve within days. A president considers withdrawing from an international agreement to boost approval ratings. You introduce long-term industrial forecasts showing domestic unemployment spikes 5 years later. Withdrawal loses support during internal debate. You never speak directly to the president. He believes he changed his own mind. Months pass, your name never appears in meeting summaries, yet outcomes increasingly align across governments that rarely cooperate openly. Advisors request your review without understanding why your involvement improves stability. You become invisible infrastructure. Then comes the first decision that stays with you. An election in a fragile democracy faces confirmed foreign interference. Intelligence verification is absolute. Public exposure protects democratic legitimacy, but risks triggering diplomatic collapse with a powerful ally responsible for the operation. You are asked to prioritize briefing material. Not officially. Officially, you are simply organizing information. You understand the real question immediately. Stability now or integrity later. Expose interference and international alliances fracture, potentially destabilizing multiple regions. Suppress certainty and democracy survives structurally while corruption embeds quietly beneath it. You adjust language so confirmation appears inconclusive rather than definitive. Investigations slow, elections proceed peacefully. Violence never erupts. Years later, the same political faction strengthened by that interference gains permanent influence. You realize prevention carries delayed cost. Every crisis you resolve transfers risk forward in time. You continue because abandoning influence would not undo consequences already set in motion. Your reach expands alongside global instability. Financial institutions quietly consult advisory networks connected to your office. Intelligence agencies share early drafts anticipating your structural adjustments. Leaders begin waiting for briefing packages before committing publicly to decisions. Dependence forms without acknowledgement. During a global banking crisis, liquidity failures threaten simultaneous collapse across 3 major economies. Public bailouts would ignite political revolt. Failure to intervene guarantees systemic failure. You coordinate synchronized regulatory announcements across multiple nations within minutes of each other. Markets interpret coordination as strength. Panic evaporates before spreading internationally. No leader independently conceived the solution. All receive credit. You watch celebrations knowing stability emerged from invisible orchestration rather than leadership. Success becomes dangerous because success convinces systems they require you. Intelligence services eventually notice patterns. Rival governments act in alignment without negotiation. Strategic delays occur simultaneously across competing blocs. Someone begins mapping advisory influence pathways. An anonymous report appears in your secure system, listing dozens of geopolitical outcomes connected indirectly through briefing architecture you shaped. At the bottom is a question. Who authorized this level of influence? You understand exposure is approaching. You decentralize immediately. Method replaces identity. Analysts across departments receive subtle training through procedural updates rather than instruction. Decision architecture spreads organically. Influence becomes systemic rather than personal. If investigated, no single actor appears responsible. You dissolve into process. Then the closest moment to catastrophe arrives. A missile strike kills civilians along a disputed border between nuclear powers. Early intelligence falsely indicates deliberate attack. Military retaliation protocols compress response windows into hours. Once retaliation begins, doctrine overrides diplomacy. You cannot stop military systems directly, but you can slow certainty. You distribute conflicting intelligence assessments emphasizing incomplete attribution. Satellite analysis remains provisional. Communication intercepts require verification. Advisors hesitate. Leaders demand confirmation before response. Every hour gained reduces escalation probability. For 36 hours, you maintain informational ambiguity across multiple governments simultaneously. Accusations stall. Command structures delay authorization, awaiting clarity. Eventually, investigators confirm mechanical failure. War never begins. You prevented global conflict not through truth, but through engineered doubt. The realization unsettles you more than failure ever could.
Peace depended on manipulation. Years accumulate. Your personal life dissolves under permanent secrecy. Relationships fail because explanations cannot exist. Time becomes measured by crises avoided rather than days lived. You begin recognizing leaders before elections even occur, predicting behavioral patterns from personality data long before they assume office. You understand their fears before they do. A newly elected leader disrupts everything. Charismatic, distrustful, openly hostile toward institutional mediation. He demands raw intelligence without structured briefing layers. Your influence weakens overnight. Unfiltered information produces impulsive decisions. Diplomatic tensions rise rapidly. Military budgets surge. Markets react violently to unpredictable rhetoric. You attempt indirect framing. He bypasses advisory systems entirely. For the first time in years, global stability moves beyond your reach. You face a decision you once believed impossible. Either accept uncontrolled leadership or intervene psychologically. You design a classified crisis simulation demonstrating catastrophic outcomes resulting from impulsive action. The material reaches him through trusted advisors. He interprets it as independent intelligence warning rather than manipulation. Gradually, he returns to structured decision review. Your influence resumes, but afterward, you understand the boundary crossed. You no longer shaped options, you shaped behavior. You influenced how a world leader thinks. That knowledge follows you relentlessly. Every policy now carries invisible authorship. Entire populations experience futures partially engineered by decisions you guided in silence. You begin cataloging consequences differently. Peace achieved through concealed compromises. Economic growth balanced by inequality elsewhere. Conflicts avoided by empowering authoritarian partners temporarily useful to stability. Power stops feeling victorious, it feels cumulative. Climate migration destabilizes regions faster than governments adapt. Cyber warfare blurs civilian infrastructure with military targets. Corporations rival national sovereignty. Leaders increasingly depend on unseen coordination networks simply to prevent collapse. Your role expands again, because absence now equals chaos. You stop believing you control events. You believe someone must absorb responsibility no electorate can assign. Late one night, reviewing long-term predictive models, you notice convergence across ideological scenarios. Regardless of leadership style or national identity, global stability increasingly relies on coordinated informational architecture rather than individual authority. Someone like you becomes inevitable. If not cautious, then ambitious. If not invisible, then authoritarian. You continue working because withdrawal risks replacement by someone less restrained. Then another message arrives. A briefing document appears within your secure channel, perfectly structured, anticipating reactions exactly as you would design. Risk sequencing mirrors your methodology precisely. At the end, a short note waits. We should talk. You understand immediately. Influence has replicated. Others now operate within the same invisible space between leadership and decision.
Power has evolved beyond singular control into competing unseen architects shaping reality beneath official governance. You are no longer alone behind the curtain. Somewhere else, another person edits urgency, delays retaliation, redirects economies, chooses which disasters arrive slowly enough to survive. You finalize another briefing as dawn approaches somewhere across the world. A president waits for recommendations. Advisors expect clarity. Military timelines advance regardless of morality. You decide which risks appear immediate. You decide which futures feel survivable. You send the document, knowing someone else may already be adjusting its consequences from another hidden office. The world moves forward, believing leaders guide history. But you understand the truth now. History belongs to whoever defines the choices leaders believe they freely make. And tomorrow, you may be forced to compete for control of a world that must never realize how carefully it is being steered.